Good afternoon. Welcome to the February 11th, 2020 regular board meeting of Everett Public Schools Board of Directors. Will you please stand and join me for the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We got serenaded during that.
Yes.
Thank you. Will the secretary please call the roll?
President Mason,
Present.
Vice President Lassane,
Present.
Director Mitchell,
Present.
Director Berg,
Present.
Director Nichols,
Present.
Student Representative Tran,
Present.
Student Representative Hussein.
Present.
Oh, it's so nice. We're all together again tonight. Our first item of business this afternoon, is the adoption of the agenda. Dr. Salzman, may you please introduce tonight's agenda?
Yes, ma'am. Good evening. Tonight's agenda contains the following: the superintendent's report, a segment for board comments, a segment for public comments, a segment for routine business, a segment for strategic progress monitoring, a segment for information discussion, upcoming agenda items, and a closed session. Since publishing the agenda, the following changes have been made. Item 6.01, the superintendent's report was updated with an additional slide. Item 9.02, the personnel report was updated with revised retirement list. Item 10.01, strategic plan mid-year progress report was updated with grammatical errors that were corrected. The board may elect to change the order of business by a majority of the vote of the members. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there a motion to approve the agenda as amended?
So moved.
Second.
It has been moved by Director Nichols and seconded by Director Berg to approve the to adopt the agenda. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, we will move to the vote. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, no. The motion carries and the agenda is adopted. Our next item of business is recognition, and tonight there are no recognitions, so we will move on to the superintendent's report.
Good evening. First of all, I'd like to start by thanking the board of directors and our student representatives that were headed to Olympia this week, as we last week met with the Washington School Directors Association Legislative Conference. The day was filled seeing that the legislative action. We met with senators and representatives, and we learned a lot, and our voices were heard. To Amina and Jackson, who represented the school district exceptionally well, and to our public, all our board of directors advocate for everybody, and when they go not only to Olympia, but when they're even in town advocating, and I want to just publicly thank the board of directors for all they do to get our message across on the needs for our students. Thank you. Last week, the cabinet members got out of their shoes and put on sneakers as they stepped in the classrooms to teach for the day. And they did a wonderful job, and even their evaluations came out really well, I heard, as they were out there. But we all were experiencing firsthand what was happening in our classrooms as it helped stay connected to the work and keep us energized. It reminds us of our purpose, that we engage with students and for students. And being back in the classroom was outstanding. So to the entire cabinet, not only do I thank you, but what a message we sent to our teachers, that we appreciate you, and to our students, we know that you're learning every day, and it makes us heartfelt and really feel good about that. Thank you. District news. We held our first community bond information meeting last week at Cascade High School, and there's going to be many more opportunities to hear the information on the bond. So please stay tuned, public, and keep an eye on our webpage. And I publicly tonight want to thank our neighboring, congratulate and wish our neighboring districts the best of luck, that they'll be going for their bond. And to my colleagues that work in other districts and superintendents, we're behind you and hope everything works out well. We have some weather makeup days. I know a lot of people in our public were asking me last week what will be happening with the makeup day. So salutes to the cabinet, to communication, for not only putting that out everywhere, but I want to publicly say it tonight again, that our new last day of school is June 18th. And we will keep our fingers crossed. According to Walter Kelly, looks like sun is on our way, and we're going to be out of this beautiful snow. So keep them fingers crossed. And we know that graduation's coming, and our seniors don't want any more extended days. So let's just hope we don't get any snow. And I want to give you a construction update. The fence work for the tennis courts at North Middle School has been completed, as well as a softball backstop and fencing. And the synthetic turf seams are completed, and the parking lot landscaping is nearly complete. And I even heard today from some Rotarians that they're so excited just to look at North Middle, and as they drive by, they're just filled with excitement. So to our construction department and to our regional and everybody working with North Middle, thank you for that. And to our board that helped get the North Middle to where it is today, thank you. That is my report this evening. And again, to our community, thank you for all your support.
Thank you. We will now move on to, actually, I have a question. Do seniors make up any days? I don't think, it's my understanding they don't.
Oh, they don't. And
Okay.
If there's enough snow days.
Yes, yes. And Mother Nature says it looks good out there.
So I've been hearing otherwise.
Yes,
They're not making it up.
that's true.
Okay. We are moving on to section 7.0 board comments, and I think I'm going to start all the way down at the end of the dais there with Student Representative Hussein, who might have a few things to share of recent outing this past weekend.
Yes, certainly. This weekend, I was given the opportunity to be able to talk to the senates and, of the state and share my personal stories. And I was able to have a really deep conversation and share my opinion on how much schools should be funded, whether that's with special ed or teacher training. And it was an amazing experience, and it really was an eye-opener. So thank you for giving me that opportunity.
Thank you. You did an excellent job, by the way. Really appreciate having you along. Student Representative Tran?
I was disappointed this year that I wasn't able to attend the legislative conference, and also last year because of the snow. But I'm excited to hear a little more from Amina later on about the things she experienced and what she's learned. But last week I ended up missing school for 4 days, and it really showed me how important attendance was, because I've never missed school that much. So I'm really grateful that for my teachers and my peers who have been really supportive in helping me catch up over the past few days.
Can I ask, did having technology at home help?
Yes,
Staying
Canvas
on top
really
of-
helped.
Yeah.
And so I was able to see exactly what was happening and be like in the classroom with them without actually being there.
That's good.
Great.
That's good.
Thank you. Director Nichols?
I was unable to attend the legislative day, so I was disappointed about that, but such is life, I think. Looking forward to next year, and we'll be there then. That's all I have at this point.
It was a busy couple of weeks. Had a great IR with Cedarwood, and that was really just productive and great to see kiddos in the classroom and just, again, to see our amazing schools in action. Had some wonderful onboarding with both finance and legal, super informative, and thank you so much, Jeff and Sarah, for just all the work they put into that. And then lastly, of course, the legislative conference, which was absolutely amazing. We have legislators, I'm sure my colleagues will talk a little bit more about it, just very supportive legislators in all 4 districts that our district spans. One thing I did want to mention, I got a wonderful note this morning from Logan Idris, the government relations coordinator for WASDA, specifically thanking us, talking about how impressed he was with our student leaders. He said Jackson and Amina were very impressive in bold, and that him and Aaron really enjoyed working with you at the pullout session. So I definitely wanted to share that. Thank you.
I don't have anything that is school related because I've just been putting a lot of miles on my in the airplane. But I just want to, as I'm traveling all over the country, following the district on Twitter. And Ian, you were in my friend Carol's classroom at Mill Creek, which was really fun to see. But I really appreciate how much, I think I follow almost every school and a whole lot of staff and some sports. The announcement of Cascade being at the tennis tournament that was here, that was very well attended, I heard. And but just seeing math students working on math, everything that happens, celebrations as well as day-to-day actions. That there are too many times that I think as I was thinking to myself, oh, I'd much rather be there. Oh, how come I can't be there? Why can't I do that? And so I think that just what Twitter is doing to recognize each of our schools and classrooms is just outstanding. And I know it's work, but I really appreciate it. So thank you.
I just want to comment it too, that this past weekend, we had a great opportunity talking with legislators. I think we did an awesome job doing that because we had our student representative and also Jackson Roberts from Cascade substituting for you, Representative Tran. But they did an awesome job, and I have a letter that I received, an email rather, that I received from Representative Shelley Kobla that wanted to make sure that you too have received this information. And it says, "Thank you so much for sitting down with me to share your views on issues affecting the school district. I appreciated very much the students' input on hate speech and wanted to pass along something that might be of interest in. Last year, the legislature passed a bill regarding hate offenses, and one of the things the bill did was establish a multidisciplinary hate crimes advisory working group with the Attorney General's office, which include K through 12 representation. And she provided me information on how to access the bill, and I will pass it along to you. I think it would be especially informative if the students were able to read the engrossed House Substitute Bill report that explains the bill. There will be a report of the working group due in July of this year that they may want to keep an eye out for." And she said, "Thank you again for visiting my office. I hope it was a productive and informative day for all. And I do plan on visiting Tambart Creek Elementary." So she was very impressed and sent me an email back just because of your discussion with her. So I wanted to say thank you and pass this along, as well as letting those in the South End region know that she wants to see Tambart Creek Elementary School. That's all I have.
Excellent. I would recommend that you send that on to Jamie and Darlene, and we'll get that in the Friday report so everyone can have the opportunity
Most
to take a look at that information and those links. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, so I'm looking forward to attending the open house on Thursday at Everett High, and I'm encouraging all my friends, everyone I run into, to do the same, and have had an opportunity to be at some schools to talk about the bond with PTAs, and was at actually just about an hour ago, was at Jackson Elementary School, and they are so excited about the possibility of a new elementary school, and it's just fun to see the enthusiasm. But I did run into one of the staff members there, and she took an opportunity to talk about the transitional kindergartners that are now at the school there, and how cute they are and how little they are, and how they're going to develop into the leaders in the classroom for the incoming kindergartners, you know, the younger ones, less experienced. So I think that's going to be a program that's just going to pay off tenfold. So I'm really excited to see that. So let's see, with that, we're going to move on to public comments. And tonight we have two public comments. The board recognizes the value of public comments on educational issues and the importance of involving members of the public in its meetings. We have two requests for comments tonight, and I'm going to give you a brief overview of how this portion of the meeting works. I will call you to the podium in the order in which you signed up tonight, and each speaker has 3 minutes. You will see 3 lights on the podium. It will first be green, and then the yellow signals you have 30 seconds left, and the red will signal that your time is done. All comments are recorded and made available for future viewing by both the board and the public. And the public comment part of this agenda is for the board to listen to your comments and what you have to say. It is not a time for debate or discussion. Board members do not respond to individual comments. As board president, I have the responsibility to ensure the meeting and all conversations are orderly, productive, and respectful, and I appreciate your help with this opportunity. Okay, first I would like to call Helen Mandifro, and she is with Family Leadership class at Everett Community College. Please come forward. Thank you for being here.
Hi.
Who runs the lights?
Hi, this is Helen. My name is Helen. I live in Everett. I am from Parent Leadership Training Institute. My project, Immigrant Family Language Problem. I'm immigrant to cope up the new environment and make their life my life problem. It's my language problem, technical and weather, and help my kids. How to help my family. My project will concentrate with the immigrant language problem. I have that problem, so I go library and I volunteer everywhere. After that, how to help my kids, the system, and I'm sorry, I'm nervous.
That's okay.
You're doing
Great.
Take your time.
So my project is like immigrant family, how to help the system. That's it. Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you so much for
much.
being here. We appreciate you. Our second public comment tonight is Joe Campana. He is a resident of the district, and he would like to address comprehensive sex education. Joe, please come forward.
Thank you for your time tonight. Joe Campana.
Thank you for, yes, need help.
So I'm coming to you today as a concerned parent of 3 daughters, 10, 6, and 8. And I'm concerned that the school district has adopted CSE curriculum that does not have a clear and measurable objective for this teaching. In a prior board meeting, a parent brought up an alarming information of the Get Real program, and I'd like the board to give a public response to that previous request for postponing the teaching, but the teaching was taught in November. It's my understanding that the teaching is coming up for in a week or two again, and I'd like the board to address the concerns that parent brought up. I'm concerned that OSPI is pushing for legislation, HB 2184 and Senate Bill 5394. I was down in Olympia a few weeks ago myself for this, and is pushing for legislation that would jeopardize bond and levy voter approval. I'd like you to please respond written after this. I see that the last, I think it was bond or levy, put 1-to-1 electronic devices in front of our students. And I'm concerned that some of the CSE vocabulary and search terms that are being used could lead to pornographic websites. So I'd like to make sure that those devices are addressed to make sure they're safe for students to do that type of research in school. And I'd also like information to be provided to the parents for their home devices, because this is a community problem. Sorry, I'm a little nervous as well.
That's okay.
Also, my daughter just went on school field trips, and there were opt-in forms for those school field trips. We actually have to sign to go to those. I'd like that to see that they provided forms for sex ed were opt-in. I know that's not necessarily a state requirement, but I'm not sure if that's something we could do here. And I'm concerned also that the forms only come out as in the English language, and I don't recall the number of English language as a second language for a lot of our students here and their parents. So I'm concerned that the information delivered to the parents isn't able to be understood potentially, and I think that really leads to an equitable, we talk about equity a lot. So I think there's an equitable solution, or there might be an equitable solution to make sure that's available. And then I'd also, looking at the work group that was requested by the state, it was made up of all women. When asked the question, why was it an all-women panel? The answer was there were 2 men that were selected, and they were not qualified. And I think about the state of Washington as a whole, and the population being roughly 50-50, give or take a couple percent. Yet the blanket statement by OSPI, Lori Dills, said, yeah, we're just going to ignore that 50% of the population. I don't think that's an equitable stance. And looks like I have a little bit more time. So they actually did a survey, and math survey, survey of population, and maybe that's statistical. And just to wrap up, out of 10,000 surveyed people or responses, 58% note at CSE. Yet the state legislature continues to push that forward along party lines. So thank you for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much for sharing your concerns with us. We will get a thorough written response back to you.
Appreciate it.
Okay, we'll move on to the consent agenda. Dr. Salzman, please introduce tonight's consent agenda.
Thank you. The board's consent agenda includes repetitive business items such as meeting minutes, personnel actions, expense vouchers, surplus lists, gifts, grants, and recurring contracts. Sometimes it includes items that occur less frequently but are of routine business nature. These items are usually reviewed by the board in the Friday report, 1 or more weeks before the board meeting. This gives directors time to ask staff questions or to consider a discussion about above policy implications of those items. The board votes on the consent agenda in a single motion. By its definition, a consent agenda is not debatable. In the case of this agenda, the superintendent's office has received no questions or comments regarding these items. Therefore, the consent agenda is presented and published for board approval.
A motion to adopt the consent agenda is in order.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to adopt the consent agenda. Does any director wish to move an item from the consent agenda and place it in new business section of the agenda? Hearing no requests, we'll move to a vote. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, no. Consent agenda is adopted, or is approved. Which takes us to section 10.0, strategic progress monitoring. And this afternoon we have a mid-year progress report, and we have a host of presenters, but I believe Mr. Gunn is going to get things started for us.
Okay, so good evening. Tonight I will be leading the presentation along with 8 other members of the superintendent's cabinet to present to you the highlights of the work done so far this year to implement our strategic plan. I wanted to emphasize that this work during the first half of the year has been by the entire district, all the way from students and staff up to the superintendent and school board. Our pleasure tonight is just to present this to you. The strategic plan was originally approved by our school board in 2011. And it's been modified annually since then as needed. And it focuses on educating, preparing, and inspiring our students for their future. The time period covered by this report is September 1 of 2019 to January 31. This presentation is accompanied by a 10-page strategic plan mid-year progress report. As if you are familiar with previous versions of the mid-year report, they were much longer than this. This year we took the approach of providing more of an overview and numerous links to board docs, to documents in our board doc system as well as DocuShare system to provide the more serious reader with the ability to dig deep into these topics and issues. So instead of presenting all of this in the mid-year report, we're providing links to that information. Each of our presenters tonight will be they will be invited by the previous presenter without a separate introduction so that we can move along expeditiously. And I wanted to cover the first, before getting into the actual cabinet presentations, to show you a graphic of the 12-month planning horizon for our strategic plan. The portion of this slide above the dash line shows the work at a strategic level of the school board and the superintendent to establish the ends that are to be achieved by our strategic plan. The portion of the slide below the dash line shows the means. So this really kind of helps us remember that the strategic goals are established in our strategic plan and in the board goals and the superintendent performance goals. And then the staff takes that and builds an annual operating plan, identifies action items, and key performance indicators on how we're going to measure performance, and all of that is built into to an annual operating plan, which is then reflected in departmental action plans and school improvement plans. So it's kind of I just verbally described what's on this. Each of these plans that we're talking about have measures of how their key performance indicators on how they're measured, and then the strategic plan itself, the priorities and goals have key performance outcomes that describe what it would look like if those goals were achieved. So that's kind of I think, hopefully a good overview of the 12-month planning horizon for our work over the course of the year on our strategic plan. And with that, I'm going to ask Dr. Peter Scott to lead us off tonight.
Thanks, Mike, and good evening, board of directors. Appreciate the opportunity to discuss this first strategic priority area in the area of teaching and learning. And they're really anchored in and connected to, as a frame of reference, this climate, culture, systems, and instruction. And that's those 4 pillars that really undergird the strategic work to date in our district. Some of the celebrations that we wanted to highlight, high-level celebrations, and you're aware of these, is that we have a very high graduation rate. In fact, our 4-year graduation rate is in the top third in the state of Washington, and the top graduation rate for graduating classes over 200. We've got over 1,200 seniors in our graduating class, so that's something to celebrate. Jackson High School and Everett High School come in 1 and 2 in the state for their 4-year rate in 2019, another celebration. We also want to celebrate all schools above that regression line for low income level versus achievement percentile. And what that really is in so many words is that our schools are outperforming many other demographically similar schools in their range, and we're proud of that. But our celebrations are tempered by the fact that we have secondary math and science performance stagnancy. We have persistent proficiency gaps by ethnicity, by English language status, by students with disabilities, and students from low-income families. And by persistent, we mean multiple years. We also have flat staff, student, and parent perceptual survey results that we're paying attention to. So we have many, many serious and significant lands of opportunity that we are paying attention to. The fact that our absolute proficient rates in some schools are only 5 out of 10. 5 out of 10 kids are meeting standard, and we know that that is not a place where we want to remain. And we are doing everything in our effort, mobilizing resources, mobilizing our human resources to change those realities. So I am going to pass the next slide off to Dr. Willard.
I love to hear about graduation rates, as we know, and always sharing those myself. Our school planning doesn't start with the first day of school, as you know. It starts long before that. We plan sometimes years in advance, but certainly during the summer, our administrators come together to start the planning for the school year. And so at the beginning of August, we have a Summer Leadership Institute that involves our school administrators and also our district administrators. This past year, we had Baruti Kafele, who is a principal, join us in August and talk about his practices as a principal. He has this great book, Is My School a Better School Because I Lead It? And through those reflective thoughts, we thought through what all of our work is. Sometimes it was, is my department a better department because I lead it? So what does our leadership really mean on a day-to-day basis? We frame our initial meetings really about the big picture, so talking about the strategic plan, talking about who we are as leaders together, and that's really the launch of the year where we all come back together. Actually, it's a time when we do community service in the afternoon, and actually had a chance this past year to visit many of our new locations that were new to all of us. Tambark was one, North was another, and some of our community partners as well. It's also a time for new administrators to be introduced. So they've been hired, they join us, they get to sit with their teams, and that's a great part of it as well, and we learn a little bit more about them. The next part of the launch of every school year really happens in August also, which is a sequence of meetings called Equip to Lead. And many of them are really about the nuts and bolts of making sure our school year goes well. A key piece of that are our school improvement plans as part of our school planning. We spent a lot of time with Dr. Matthews in analyzing our data. The Washington School Improvement Framework is key to that. And schools line up where they see gaps, what their work's going to look like, and how they're going to work with their school teams to address those gaps and where they're going to address barriers. The other piece of that is really what is our thinking for how our schools and our classrooms to change over the course of the year. We brought an expert to the table. Her name is Kristen Anderson, and she pulls on the greatest of thinkers. I couldn't find my current copy of Visible Learning, but Kristen Anderson joined us at the beginning of August to really talk about teacher leadership and distributed leadership. This is not her book, but this is where she framed her ideas and shared with leaders, meaning teachers, our school leaders, and they worked as teams to talk about how leadership looks at each school, how decisions are made, and the importance of leadership at every level. And so that was key. We had about 200 attendees. That was at Jackson High School. And then we had her back to really look at high impact instructional strategies. That's where Hattie's Visible Learning book, if I had another book to hold up, a lot of studies going on. We did that right before the school year. And it says 22 schools participated. Boy, they're amazing days with Kristen Anderson, if you ever get to see her. But all of our schools at some point have been touched by her work. We had her come back for some singular days with some of the schools that didn't join on those days. And also in October, she came back for a few of the other schools as well as follow-up. So we're always in a state of learning, and August is really the launch for that and making sure that we've lined up our big messages for the entire school year. So with that, I'd like to invite Larry Fleckenstein to the podium.
Well, as Dr. Scott opened today's presentation with a focus on our work to increase student achievement, the very first day that teachers have in Everett Public Schools and the way that we onboard them is all about creating that instructional focus. It's imperative that our instructional staff receive professional development and employee onboarding that will help them meet the needs of all of our kids and achieve our school improvement goals. To achieve this end, the new teacher orientation in August prepared our new teachers over 4 days, engaging them in topics to onboard them as a district employee and to prepare them to work with our students. Our teachers participated in professional learning for instruction that included using technology as an instructional tool, building effective student-teacher partnerships, exploring district curriculum and instruction materials, and best instructional and classroom management practices. The professional learning of our paraeducators is critical to their role in supporting learning in the classroom, and 500 paraeducators were also trained in a 2-day professional development institute in August on topics ranging from a supporting and positive safe learning environment, child and adolescent development, cultural identity and diversity, technology in the classroom, instructional best practices, and effective communication strategies. And we are now just beginning our preparations for this coming August for both of those professional learning opportunities for our instructional staff. Dr. Lancaster.
So tomorrow we wrap up our first round of instructional reviews as Sequoia High School finishes out the cycle. Instructional reviews are a very intentional process to help us understand the teaching and learning happening in our schools and helping us build our instructional systems of improvement and support. So it's about equity, ensuring that each student in every school has a high quality education, building capacity in our teachers and in our system, and providing robust support services for our students and our staff. So it starts with the data review. The principal goes through the data and tells the story of the school. Then we embark on the classroom learning walks, which is really the telling part about how learning is taking place in the school. And then there's a collaborative debrief and a collaborative action planning session where you get to examine what are the glows of the school and what are the grows, what are those big rocks or those areas that we need to focus on. And then that's followed by some intentional wraparound support for the school. And it's a very focused system that lets the school teachers and leadership know that we are all in this together, working to help improve student learning. So it's been very well received and has been a fantastic process. And Peter's up next.
Here to close out this last slide for us in the teaching and learning priority area around standards-aligned curriculum and instructional support. So as you know, we've made some significant investments in expansion in our iReady diagnostics, and most importantly, the what to do around what those diagnostics show. So we implemented the fall diagnostic. We are almost through with administering the winter diagnostic. We're looking very much forward to seeing the growth between those two benchmark assessments. So that work is well underway. We continue to monitor iReady online lessons, which fills in the gaps for all students. So it identifies the gaps through computer adaptive technology so that students receive individualized support by standard and by skill. And that's extraordinarily important. At a previous board meeting, you've heard about the math and science program updates. You've also heard about our transitional kindergarten, and yes, they are small, and yes, they are very cute, and they are here, and they're here to stay. There are 95 of them over 5 schools. That exceeds our expectation. We try to do right by the demand in the community, and so we're really proud of the successful launch so far. We're 2 weeks into it, and as you know, this program focuses on those emerging academic and social skills so that these kids can navigate and have that longer runway into kindergarten. So yes, they can be mentors for their peers that will show up in the late summer and early fall. So we're really, really excited about that program as a jump start toward student success. And with that, I'm going to invite up Brian Beckley.
So we really enjoy in our department the partnership with teaching and learning in strategic priority area 2, especially with our authentic learning trainings. We're in year 4 of the focus on preparing our teachers as we go one-to-one in schools across our district. So the decision in our integrated technology plan was to ensure that our teachers were ready with this shift in integrating technology and teaching differently and using them as a tool for learning. And so this year is we're nearing the end of this training. We only have one more cohort to go. There's 3 trainings, and as a reminder, the 3 days that the staff comes, it teaches them the idea of what blended learning is, classroom management, how to manage a classroom with technology in it, and then culminating with planning of units that they can use when they fully go one-to-one the following year. Those are the schools you see listed there and the number of staff members for each of those schools. This is the last group of our middle schools. So Gateway and North will go one-to-one next year. So their staff, in fact, we've had they're here this week, the staff from Gateway and North. And then our elementaries will come later this month. Those 3 elementaries, Tambar Creek actually came in August, and we did a really intensive 2 days with the Tambar Creek staff. And just as a reference, this leaves, believe it or not, only 4 elementary schools in the last cohort that will go next year. Emerson, Hawthorne, Silver Firs, and Silver Lake will be the last 4 schools to go through the authentic learning training. And so we will have that set up for them next year with those training dates. Amazing, this journey and where we're at. Canvas continues to be a point of emphasis for us as we work with our staff and our schools on utilizing this learning management tool. I like to update the board on sort of status. This is through first semester. You can see the growth from last year to this year. That graph in the middle shows the number of published courses in Canvas, the number of teachers utilizing Canvas, and the number of students utilizing Canvas. And so we're seeing sort of steady progress and growth in those areas. The bottom bar graph is page views, and we anticipated seeing the difference between this year and the previous year, because last year a big push was the teachers creating their courses, and so there was a lot of page views because they were going in and logging in multiple times to edit their courses. And so it would make sense that there would be more page views last year, but there continues to be steady usage, and now the courses are up and running, so there's less times a teacher has to go in and edit those. But we're continuing to work and we're excited about the connection of Canvas to parents. We're currently piloting with some teachers at Jackson High School of the use of the parent app through Canvas. The app is much easier for parents to navigate than the website tool. And so our hope is by the end of this month, the Canvas app will be available district-wide. But we want to pilot it and test it first with some staff at us. Well, we're going to start with Jackson High School because we have some willing participants there. We also have made a big push this semester at the start of this year on equity across the system, especially at non-one-to-one schools. We wanted to update. These are the 9 schools left that have not gone one-to-one fully, and you can see the number of technology we've added to increase their availability and access. More and more digital tools are available. We've talked a lot about iReady and its access and the students having access, so you can see across the system that we're increasing access and equity of access across the system. The exciting thing is our plan with these 9 schools is all of them will be one-to-one next year. So we're going to ramp up and move the timeline up, and so all of these schools, our plan is this summer to fully outfit them and have those up and running for the first day of school. Another focus is there's been a lot about network security and privacy, and it's been in the news a lot, and so that is something that continues. We wanted to update the board on our efforts, that what we've done at the beginning of this year to ensure that as much as possible we can safeguard our network and the sensitive information that we have. So we've spent resources and time and energy on ensuring that. Here's a couple of highlights. There's a new internet firewall with enhanced security, and it helps us better identify encrypted files and see what applications are actually being used out there. It's more powerful, it's faster, so that has been an upgrade. In email, that's another way that we have sometimes some vulnerability with malware and phishing protection enhancements we've worked closely with Microsoft in that. We have thousands of attempts that we block every day, probably on an average week about 10,000 or so that we're able to stop before they're getting through our email system, which is helpful to maintain security across the network. Our computer protection and remediation upgrade is essentially we moved to a cloud service and next-gen tool that's better capable of detecting and preventing cyber attacks. We've also increased and improved our storage and backup equipment, we upgraded it. That was like an 8-year-old system that we've upgraded. And one of the exciting things in working with Mr. Gunn and his team is there's a lot more efficiencies out there as we network. We put things on the network that like HVAC controls and lighting systems that can be controlled through the network. And so we're creating a segmented network where those tools can operate, and we segment it away from sensitive student information. So if there is a vulnerability and somebody, that's how they enter in, it stays away from the student information, the staff information, because a lot more of those tools are becoming up, and we want them to have those access tools available. So that's been an exciting piece that we've added over the first semester of this year. So with that, I will turn this over to Mrs. Kovacs.
So among the many things that Human Resources is responsible for, recruitment and retention is by far the most important work that we do. So I'm going to highlight just a couple of the big rocks that we are working on this year. So we're hosting certificated job fair for the first time this year on March 20th. And the work that we are doing in preparation for it is focusing on early hiring and expediting our current hiring practices. So the preparation is really driving out revamping of our protocols and redefining how we prepare our candidates for the interview. And quite frankly, at the very end of that career fair, preparing our principals on how to make an on-the-spot job offer, so having contracts available. So we're excited about the work that we're doing and the outcome that we'll have as a part of that. Secondly, we are in the second round of, it's now two-year grants with the State of Washington Professional Educator Standards Board, Recruit Washington Teachers Bilingual Educator Initiative. It's part of our long-term recruitment efforts and the notion of grow your own. So our multilingual, bilingual students are being recruited into this course called Introduction to Education, where they are granted high school credit as well as credit at the college level for a degree in education. So it started last year with one class at the high school, Cascade High School. It is now expanded to all of our comprehensive high schools. We are in partnership with University of Washington, Bothell, Everett Community College, and Marysville Public Schools. Marysville was a little slow in coming. We led the way last year. They now have 2 of their comprehensive high schools participating in this as well. So we're really excited about building sustainability in this work, really in collaboration with CTE as well. So it will take time to see the fruits of our effort, but we're excited about the work. And then our retention efforts continue to expand and grow. We have hosted for the last 5 years what we call a staff of color reception, where we create a space where both community and staff members can come together in an informal setting to just talk about things that aren't necessarily related to work, but what does it mean to be a part of this Everett community, and how can I help you get connected to resources and that type of thing. It continues to grow. Each year we have staff volunteers who now help us plan for the event so that there is more buy-in and engagement to the activities that happen. So it's beyond just a social event, but really opportunity to recognize our staff of color. And professional development is a collaborative effort with the teaching and learning department. We in Human Resources are the repository for all of the clock hours, credits, so on and so forth. In addition to that, we also are embarking on leading in the development of our paraeducator professional development work in collaboration with teaching and learning. So you heard earlier from Larry in regard to the paraeducator professional development offerings. As part of those offerings, there is the state required training that is called the Fundamental Course of Study. So we offered the 14 required credits in addition to the robust offerings that Larry had mentioned to our paraeducators. The HR staff is in the early stages of planning for next August, and we'll offer again the 14 credits and beyond for our paraeducators as well. And then lastly, we, as part of our human resources work in supporting our principals as human capital leaders, and as a result of our training, where thank you to the board for sending us a cohort of staff, 2 of our regionals, 2 HR staff, and then 2 principals to learn about human capital. We will be part of that work immediately started with the planning of this job fair, and then we will continue that work in addition to planning a model with HR leaders as business partners with our regionals and our principals as we move through this work. With that, I will have Jeff Moore come up.
Thank you. Effective management of resources, it may not be glamorous, but we all know it's really important to the work we do. So how do we demonstrate that? I think we effectively demonstrate it through transparency, but more importantly, it's about planning well ahead and preparing ourselves for what can happen. And transparency is demonstrated through the use of fiscal advisory reports, as well as our extra efforts for the comprehensive annual financial report, our board reports, and quite frankly, the amount of conversation we have with you as a board here in the public forum. So we not only demonstrate it, but what's important is how external entities view our effective management of resources. And just to name a few, later tonight we'll talk a little bit about our bond demographics, but we also have one audit finding in the last 19 years. And again, the awards externally from those who view us, not only just as a comparison to other school districts, but in comparison to the public sector and governmental entities. So now I'll turn it over to Mr. Gunn.
All right, we are in Resource Management Priority Area 4, and I'll continue on with that. Presenting information that a lot of you, a number of you anyway, have seen in various presentations before, including the superintendent's comments tonight, covered some of this. So hopefully without repeating too much, Tambar Creek Elementary School opened this last fall. The only things left now is just a few punch list items and a little bit of paperwork, and we'll be bringing it to you for final acceptance. North Middle School is in full swing. The new building opened in fall, this last fall, and site work will be completed by June because you need some good weather to do some of this work, including the striping. We're going to put a new surface down in the tennis court area. We're going to put some infill in the synthetic turf field within the track area and a rubberized track surface on the track itself. Other than that, the work is substantially completed out there. The Woodside Elementary School, the new office building will be complete this coming fall, and the site work along with all the other buildings will be completed by fall of 2021. Building A, which is the first classroom building to be modernized, will actually be done this April. So we'll be completing the first classroom building before the new office building is done, around spring break or so. Technology rollouts, one-to-one. You heard from Brian Beckley here about that already. These schools listed here show you the schools where we have achieved the one-to-one student-to-computer ratio. And then finally, we have a bond proposal on April 28th, a $317.4 million bond proposal. And this is just one slide covering that whole big topic. It gives you the four key themes in the bond: giving our students facilities and tools necessary for STEM career pathways, especially at the three comprehensive high schools; increasing safety and security for students and staff and schools; ensuring students have enough room to learn by adding 21st century classroom space; modernizing and repairing building systems; and then providing equitable access and opportunities for students while, and this is a big item here, while not increasing tax rates. So with that, I'll ask Dr. Dana Riley-Black to finish off this presentation, and then I'll be back to make a few more comments at the end. Excuse me.
Thanks. I will share with you updates regarding the fifth and final strategic priority, strategic relationships. Strategic relationships are woven through all of the strategic priorities and the work of all of our colleagues here. So the narrative I provide this evening describes the work of many. The mid-year report provides a summary of numerous strategic relationships. However, for this presentation, we have identified 3 key performance outcomes to highlight: relationships aligned to college and career readiness, physical, intellectual, and social, emotional health, well-being, and safety, and long-term planning. We have many partnerships in support of college and career readiness. Today, I will touch on 3 partner projects. This last summer, in partnership with the City of Everett, we launched Everett Career Link, a summer internship for high school students. In all, 50 Everett Public Schools students completed the 90-hour internship and received high school credit. Including the city and the district, 15 employers accommodated these students across 29 work sites. In September, we launched Project Search at Providence Regional Medical Center, Everett. This partnership also includes work opportunities, Division of Vocational Rehabilitation, and Snohomish County Developmental Disabilities. Project Search, formerly known as 18 through 21 Gaining Ownership of Adult Lives Goal Transition Program, provides students with classroom instruction, career exploration, and hands-on training through a worksite internship now at Providence. 13 students in their final year of the 18 through 21 program enrolled in Project Search. And finally, this past summer, we formally launched Building Equity in Aerospace Training, or the BEAT project. Funded by a grant from the National Science Foundation, this project partners Everett Public Schools with Everett Community College, the National Girls Collaborative Project, and Marysville and Mukilteo school districts. Starting in middle school, by way of mentoring and activities such as industry field trips, girls are introduced to aerospace careers and guided into related high school coursework, such as the Cascade High School Manufacturing Program, as well as post-secondary credential programs. The expertise of partnerships is absolutely necessary to achieve health, well-being, and safety for our students and staff. As part of the Homeless Student Stability Education Program, we partner with trained advocates from Cocoon House to work with our district's high school and middle schools, with priority on unaccompanied homeless youth in grades 11 and 12. These advocates support homeless students and their families to identify services and supports. The Trauma-Informed Practices Grant from Snohomish County Human Health Services contributes to our district's focus on social and emotional learning. The grant provides consultation on trauma-informed practices such as school staff knowledge and skills of managing behavior and creating meaningful relationships. This new grant allows Evergreen and North Middle Schools to join Jefferson Elementary School and Cascade and Everett High Schools in this important consultation partnership. And finally, to educate our district community about teen vaping, we partnered with Snohomish Health District, who provided 4 presentations within our district. 3 for middle school families of Eisenhower and Heatherwood, and 1 at the Community Resource Center for district staff. These presentations were featured on KCPQ 13, and in turn, other districts in the county have requested presentations. And finally, strategic relationships are certainly integral to our long-term planning. Such planning is best informed through broad community engagement. At the onset of his tenure, our superintendent launched his year by hosting 3 community listening events across the district to hear from families and community members. And as you're aware, the capital bond proposal on the April 2020 special election ballot was informed by the work of a community-based committee. And we now are in a phase of intensive communication to engage and inform staff and community members around the bond. These efforts include over 40 community presentations, as well as the development of a community newsletter, mailers, and social media. And finally, we have launched the Longfellow Task Force, an advisory committee comprised of 13 community members. It is currently developing recommendations regarding the potential and preferred use of the Longfellow property, which will be delivered to the superintendent in June of 2020. Mr. Gunn.
Well, this completes our presentation tonight. One thing that occurred to me just as I was listening to all this was, and I hope you noticed it too, is a sense of the alignment and the integration of this work. Much of the information that was discussed relates to more than one departmental area, crosses boundaries, and I mean, I could have just presented that last slide as part of the facilities work as well, and yet it is truly part of the strategic relationship priority area in our strategic plan. So with that, I just wanted to let you know that we had a lot of information to share. It was really hard to winnow it down to this succinct presentation and report. And the idea tonight is not so much to generate questions, because you should have, and we hope you have, heard a lot of this information already. This is really kind of a summary of the work so far this year. So with that, I wanted to thank you all for listening, and this concludes our presentation tonight.
Thank you very much. That was a lot of information, and we actually might have a few directors that have a question or two, since they have not been here since the beginning of the school year or previous years. But it is great to see some of these programs get traction and get built out over the years. So it's a very impressive presentation that covers a lot of information. And I imagine you could probably go on another hour or two if you were asked.
We could, yes.
So with that, I'll open it up to questions. Do directors or student representatives have questions for any of, well, really anyone in the room?
I have one question, if that's all right. Sure. And two compliments. First, Mike, talking to Stephanie, I don't know how to pronounce her last name, Mill Creek City Council, who has one or two of her children at Mill Creek at Woodside. I said, how is it going with the construction? She goes, I don't think it's disrupting anything. She says she spends a lot of time there as a parent, and just a compliment to the construction team, if you can pass that on.
I will, thanks.
But Brian, I just have a quick question about Canvas. The number of students seems to outweigh the number of students. So are those unique students, or is that number of students in, say, multiple classes?
It could be number of students in multiple classes.
Okay, and then also for the classes where the teachers are doing it, especially because we're, especially equity and access, is it maybe an equal number of basic ed classes in the high school as well as advanced classes in the high school, or does one type of teacher or subject favor? Have we looked at that to make sure that if you're in chemistry AP or regular chemistry, Canvas is being used regardless? Or
Well, it's certainly available regardless. We could look at the drill down deeper as to see what types of teachers. I mean, all content areas and subject areas it's available for. Some have used it more readily to start with, but it is available. But I could get that information to you.
It just seems like an opportunity, especially like Hannah's case, where if she is in advanced classes or not, and had Canvas access versus another student that may be in different classes and didn't. Hannah knows she got a little behind, but without Canvas, she probably would have gotten further behind.
Right.
And so it would.
And we want there to be equal access to all content areas, and that's certainly the next push.
Okay.
And I would think as the parent app becomes available, there'll be some of those types of questions as more and more parents want to utilize Canvas as a communication tool across the system. So that would be but I'll look for that information and get that to you.
Okay. It's just a question.
No,
Just
it's a good question.
as we're growing it, are we being aware of classes and types of classes being impacted? So thank you.
Okay.
Can I piggyback off that question, Brian? What type of information went out regarding the parent app on Canvas so that across the board,
It hasn't gone out yet because we want to test it first. And so the teachers at Jackson that are piloting it, those parents, so we haven't done a broadcast out yet about its availability because we're testing it.
So if a classroom a teacher is testing it, the students in that classroom's parents.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
Oh, okay.
And
so we don't know.
I know who the
yet.
teacher.
Okay.
We're starting with one teacher at Jackson.
Okay.
I just don't want to say it. Right now.
Not my daughter's teacher.
But you would have heard from anyway.
No, but we did get an email. Brian. Sorry. So kind of piggybacking on my colleagues' questions. So one, thank you very much for the update on Canvas. As a parent and watching my students use it for like the last 5 years, we have loved it, especially because the community colleges as well as UW has embraced it. So it's really gotten them prepared for what's coming next in their educational journey. And I'm very happy about the parent app because if any of you have gone into Canvas as a parent, it makes my head hurt because there's a lot of information that's just not relevant to me as a parent there.
On the website?
On the website, yes. So there's that.
The app you'll like the app much better.
Wonderful. But my question is, there's a lot of kind of that alphabet soup of technology going on right now. So we've got Canvas, we've got iReady for our itty bitties, we've got Naviance also for our high schools. How is all of this being adopted? And is there kind of like a plan, let's say for Canvas to say, at this point, we need 100% adoption by all of our high school teachers to have them, to Tracy's point on, Director Mitchell's point on equity, right? Everybody's doing it by 2023. Right. And Naviance, on top of that, right? And then potentially iReady coming in there at the middle school level. So it's just a lot, and I'm wondering how that's being digested.
Right. And that's one of the partnerships we have with Teaching and Learning is the implementation of Canvas. We kind of did a slow rollout. Some districts have just like opened it up and just said go. We kind of did a slower rollout, but that's definitely the next phase, is that sort of consistent application of we're all going to be using it as our learning management tool, and in partnership with our Teaching and Learning folks about its utilization at the high school level especially. It really has it's a K-12, it has application, but especially at high school, at the secondary level, it can be a very useful tool. And that's the next phase for us, is as more and more teachers have built pages and views, having that applied for a consistent application with all staff is our goal for in working with them on its application. In terms of the other, it's having a coherent, model, and it is definitely a goal for us as we work together on educating parents on where all these things fit and how we could utilize Canvas maybe as a shelf or where those things can live, so they can go sort of in that dashboard.
Can it hook with Naviance?
Yeah, well,
do they integrate?
Right. I mean, that's always one of our questions when we take these tools on, is what's that interface look like? Is it a plug-in? Where can it fit? A lot of these tools, Canvas is used in a lot of places, so a lot of them have built-in integrations that are pretty seamless. And so that always is a question we have, even with new curriculum adoptions, how can that plug into Canvas? So it's a one-stop shop. That's definitely the goal.
Because, and just my last point is, as a parent, it'd be great to have that dashboard, to your point, just about, because that's a lot, right? So, like, do I check Naviance today? Do I check my iReady? Have they done their 45 minutes? And oh, by the way, all their stuff is on Canvas. Just if you could just hit that link and say, yep, this is my parent dashboard from the district.
Okay.
So.
Parent, I like that.
Any further questions? Okay. Thank you very much. And at this point, we will break for 5 minutes and
schedule.
We're breaking.
I'm taking a quick break.
We're taking Okay, we'll go ahead and get started here again. We are on to section 11.0, information and discussion, and tonight we have a budget development update by Mr. Moore.
Thank you very much. Happy to be here, and I do also want to say thank you to Director Nichols and Director Berg for spending some time with not only myself but with some of the finance team as a precursor to this discussion. And one thing that we did point out is that this is a touch base point. We come to the board in November with a fiscal outlook, and it has legislative components. We're going to come back and work with the board in March on the 17th on a more of a workshop style. So this is kind of an update at the midway point. And part of the, other than the key performance outcome and the board goals that we're addressing in this presentation, we really want to go over some points with you. And that the first one is that strong fund balance management is paramount to the fiscal stability of a school district. And we'll show you some examples of that. Also, that as we found down at the WASDA conference, new revenue is unlikely in 2020. And as we spoke to our legislators, I think I compliment you for pointing out that if it's not this year, we're really counting on you in the following year in the biennial session. And that new local revenue beyond the voter-approved levels is not anticipated. In other words, our voters committed to a level of funding through 2022, and any variation from that based upon what the legislature may or may not do is not possible till the 2022 levy, and the following revenues would occur in 2023. So we're more or less in a holding pattern for 2 years with the structural deficit that's causing us to stay flat in revenues but have local costs associated with that. And I think that's what I'm referring to in the 6th bullet is the phase out of regionalization. While we'll get an IPD increase, we'll have that step down. So in essence, our salary increases will be covered by fund balance and levy going forward. We also found this year that, as you'll see, is that we have new initiatives and new work to do. And in order to accomplish that, we have to stop doing something different. So when we add program, we actually have to reduce in other areas to accomplish that. So any board objective, whether it's a dashboard or whether it's a curriculum adoption, we have to look somewhere else to redistribute the funding, pending some new revenue source that is unforeseen to us at this point in time. So this presentation at first, I just want to talk about fund balance management because prior to and even in the recent meetings, the board has talked about what is the right fund balance, what's too much, what's too little. And I think that what we would say, there's several things to think about. One philosophy is if you're storing fund balance, you're not putting that funding to use to support the instruction of students. So for that reason, you don't want too high of a fund balance. The second thing is a higher fund balance is often considered a myth or fact that it influences bargaining outcomes. It's less likely from our perspective, based upon our strong labor relationships, that is a factor here. And finally, we know that a higher fund balance will protect us during unforeseen times. And so we're going to see a history of what we've done. Also, a higher fund balance is very important to our rating agencies. And when they look at us, they look at not only, when rating agencies look at us, and the reason we're putting this endorsement here is for our constituents to see that they look at wealth factors. And so we're upper middle class here in terms of range of districts, and our more affluent districts would naturally, you would assume, to have higher bond ratings. But they also look back and say, over the past 10 years, we talked to you every couple of years, and what story did you tell us, and what did you predict, and are those predictions coming true moving forward? And we believe that's a story that we want to reinforce with you. But they also gave some really clear indicators, is that we've told them while we've been riding with this high fund balance in the face of a levy cliff that we will be spending it back down. We will put those funds back to use, and we will stay in the 6 to 7% range. I think we would all agree that staying above 7% is a good in this environment with the unknowns ahead. So they've given us some pretty clear indication on how far you can spin the fund balance down before they react. And in fact, in this particular paragraph and somehow the alignments off there, they're basically saying we don't want to see it happen in 1 year. We want to see a slow decline in fund balance to show that you have control over the circumstances. So if you look up there and you consider we're with 295 school districts, those are our peers in terms of we're the top 8 with Moody's and the top 7 with Standard & Poor's. So I think that in terms of being concerned about using fund balance for the next couple of years, this more or less frames the ability for us to maintain our strong ratings, particularly with success of a 2020 bond. We'll be out asking, and that saves our constituents tax dollars. I think what we're proposing tonight and what we're asking you to support is a long-term plan on how we'll manage that fund balance. So if I go to the next slide, this is, and as those arrows come in, and if that is too small, that one of the attachments is a PDF of this chart in a larger form. But if you were to look through time, and I'm going to use my cursor, I think you can see a cursor in your screens, if I'm not mistaken. If you look at Everett down here, this was the point in time in which on the face, the court had ruled, I think, January 2012 on McCleary, and we were looking at reducing $2 million. And I believe even Director Lassane, you were on the Fiscal Advisory Council at that time, and what we recommend to the board is rather than cutting in the face of new revenues that were scheduled, that we use fund balance down to the 5%. It was unprecedented times after already cutting $17 million. And then once the funding started coming in, it first came in for transportation dollars and material supplies and operating costs. There really was a lot of freedom to where we could have built up fund balance, but what the board elected to do at that time was to invest in structural supports, such as not only the full-day kindergarten that was funded by the state, but adding 4 more schools to that list. And we dipped a little below the 5%, but then we started building up as we started catching up with with the need to actually provide additional supports. That's also about when the technology levy passed and provided some relief as well. So we've continued to look at this 2018 levy cliff and built our fund balance up to the area of about 10%. And one of the compliments here is when you look at districts with these wide variations, is they may or may not have a board and a superintendent that has a fiscal resolve to look forward. So part of our ratings are really attributed to the success of you as leaders in adhering to these strong fiscal principles. When you get to this particular year, that's the year when before we were always lobbying the state to fund compensation first. If you give us more teachers for K-3, if you give us more teachers for kindergarten, the levy has to pay 28% of their salaries. And so we got to the point that we were implementing those programs, but consistently you can see districts were spending down fund balance. And then you walk into the year where the state applied their state tax, we still had local levy dollars coming in, and districts with grandfathered levies tended to increase more than other districts. But we're in a situation where we had that revenue bulb, and it looked as if the districts were really winning a result of McCleary, but it's the following year where the levies were cut. So you can see sort of that trend, and I just wanted to point out the districts here with the ratings that are comparable to ours include Shoreline, North Shore, Everett, North Shore, I can't even read it, Bellevue, Issaquah, and Lake Washington. So we would argue that, you know, the framing of this proposal and where we're trying to sustain follows that past pattern of strong fiscal management. This is the slide we showed you, and we identified that we need $1 to $2 million worth of cuts going forward. And then today, as we work with our Fiscal Advisory Council, which we met last night with, to look over not only some program reductions, but actually more significantly some program additions, This is the trajectory we see going forward. And as you can see, about halfway through this year, new revenues will start to come in to some degree. Quite frankly, when we asked our voters back in 2017 for 2018, what $2,500 per student would be, we're actually falling below that. So our levy authority is above what we're collecting. So we know to some extent, whatever may happen, that there will be added resources at that point in time. The revenue outlook, this is just a repeat slide from before. We do want to emphasize, as we did down in Olympia, and student director Hussein, we talked about special education, and we talked about the shortfall there, and that's basic education. We hope that quite possibly, as the directors mentioned, we will have new resources. The other thing that happened was talking about this overall prototypical school model. And one component of that prototypical school model that was emphasized to be put before the legislature first is really the social, emotional, the nurses, the safety. And this particular slide, again, demonstrates the orange being what the state funds, and the darker orange or rust demonstrates what we actually spend. So if we get new resources out of this short session or in the future sessions, you can look at it two ways. One is I think it would mitigate the reductions that we will need to do, because if we don't have additional resources, we will be making adjustments again next year. Our costs will go up by $3 million purely for salary. So we're in a good pattern of being prepared to come to you with a list of recommendations, which were really universally accepted by the fiscal advisory last night, as well as program enhancements. These are some of the factors, and I think we've sort of articulated this. Obviously, it could get better, it could get worse. That's what this slide is about. We talked about SEB, and it's important to point out that for our district, when you have higher salaries for our educators, it's a priority. You have less of them. And so as a result, our district is not as impacted by SEB as some of the other districts that are talking about 2, 3, and 4 million. So the budget development progress, I just want to point out kind of a before snapshot. This is our process last year. And the thing I would highlight is we were doing the building staffing at a later point in time. We pre-identified positions that we know every year, more recently, through attrition, we're going to lose we're going to have either retirements or resignations in the 75 to 100 educators out of. It's just what happens. So we have the ability to know that within special educations, we're going to go out and hire resource staff. There's not a risk when you have a higher fund balance of overhiring. And so those safeguards are in place. But what we always have tried to do for the past few years is really align that the budget is driven out of the state of the school reviews. Well, when you click forward to this year, the model of the instructional reviews begins to condense that input, and it really finally aligns with what we need to build a budget. So what you'll see on the list is that the outcomes of those instructional reviews really feed into the priorities that are identified when we come and talk to you in March. And by getting building staffing out early, then we're setting the stage to understand the specifics of the positions that are available to you. So if we start looking forward, again, last night, we received kind of the feedback from our schools on building staffing. Fiscal Advisory Council meeting last night affirmed what we're going to bring to you with a few adjustments that we'll communicate. And then tonight's a budget update. We are going to meet with our leaders, our supervisors. What do we call that school? And we're going to meet with the school leadership to review the thoughts, and we will be back to you after another Fiscal Advisory Council meeting on March 17th, and we'll kind of break it down into some of the information that we think will be especially informative for our new board directors. So with that, we plan to have the ASB presentations here in May, preliminary, and then board adoption on July 7th. So the summary is just repeating the statements made on the lead-in. And with that, I just thank you for this update, and we look forward to supporting any questions you have not necessarily tonight, but if you have them tonight, but certainly between now and March 17th.
Thank you very much for the presentation. I'm going to start off. I have a question. Do we have you? I know you have this number. I don't know if it's been presented publicly. What is the reduction in the cost of the reduction from 24% to 18%? The regionalization.
It's about $3 million for every 2%. So as it goes from 24 to 22, $3 million. So each year, that's where I'm suggesting that we have about a $3 million offset we need to do until there's a revenue. But also remember, that also includes the fact that when we went out to our voters, we didn't start at 2,500, we stepped up.
Correct.
So over for 22, it'll be up to the full 2,500. 2021 is at $2,350, $2,350 per student.
So that will help offset.
So it's included in that. Otherwise, it would have been more dramatic.
Right.
So the net is about $3 million a year that we have to account for.
The net between the reduction in regionalization and the increase? Okay, so that's the net. Okay.
Yeah, so when you look at our long-term projections, they're including labor projections that are consistent with normal patterns. So we're projecting that our labor costs are going to go up at a historical rate, and that our state funding is going to be flat, and the levy is going to step up. And when you blend it all together, it's about $3 million a year.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Does anyone else have a question or a comment? Mr. Moore? Okay.
You look close. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much.
I do have one question.
Oh.
March 17th, has that date been calendar reminder sent out to all of us?
It's a morning meeting.
Morning meeting, okay.
It's a 7:30 a.m. meeting, and we all need to wear green.
Okay.
Orange.
I prefer
or-
orange.
If you're Lutheran, you wear orange.
Okay.
Yeah,
All
we
right.
prefer orange.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, with that, we do not have any unfinished business or new business this evening, so we will move on to section 14.0, which is our upcoming agenda items. Dr. Salzman.
Okay, thank you. Upcoming agenda items. At the March 4th special meeting, the board will attend the Everett Public School Foundation annual breakfast. And at the regular meeting on March 10th, 2020, we will discuss the following: 24 credit plan update, PTSA Council recognition, enrollment outlook, January financial report, board travel, asset preservation update, and surplus equipment.
Thank you. We are on to section 15.0, which is executive or closed session. And tonight, we do have a closed session. The Open Public Meetings Act provides that the board discussions on certain topics may be held in closed session. Tonight, the board will hold a closed session to discuss collective bargaining negotiations or strategies, and we expect to, we can adjourn. Yes, so, okay, okay. So, with that, we will move to section 16.0, which is adjournment. This concludes the business scheduled to come before the Everett Public Schools Board of Directors. This meeting is adjourned.